Good morning, everybody. We have a great show coming your way today on GoJo and Golic. Happy Friday. Here's what you have to look forward to. Roddy Jones from ACC Network going to join us to talk about the kickoff for college football. We cannot wait. Plus, college football playoffs, 12 teams. Who makes it? We will talk about our predictions. Plus, preseason wrapping up this weekend in the NFL. Who has the most to prove? We're going to get into all that and more on a Friday edition of GoJo and Golic. Let's do it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here on a Friday. We got a great show for everybody, as always. Download, subscribe, rate, and review the thing. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings network. As Jesse mentioned, we finally made it. I almost had forgotten yesterday, Dad, as I was sitting around until someone texted me and they're like, hey, you realize we get to wake up and watch College Game Day tomorrow. This weekend, it's finally here. College football is back. We will get into plenty that went on yesterday in the NFL. Congratulations to Creed Humphrey on a gigantic, well-deserved, big boy-sized payday for the Kansas City Chiefs. We can talk about their future. Anthony Richardson played a football game in the preseason last night, and we're going to go over it with a fine-tooth comb because that's what we do with this guy, and that's what we care about. But, Dad, at noon Eastern tomorrow, Florida State and Georgia Tech are going to kick off a football game and the entire college football season, playing across the pond in Dublin, Ireland. This was a game I got to be a part of as a player in 2012 with Notre Dame. We played Navy in the same stadium, Aviva Stadium, over there in Dublin. We went over and thankfully handled business pretty well after a fun trip over that way, but there is nothing like the feeling of this day. And I know you've covered this sport for a long time. You experienced it as both a player and a parent going through it. So happy College Football Eve Day, Dad. We're fired up to be here.
Yeah, I got to go to that Ireland game too when you and your brother Jake played. And as a parent getting drunk, I got to go last year as an alumni playing golf and getting drunk. So I got to experience it in a great way.
I was going to say, you guys got to have fun on that trip. We were in a hotel. When you travel to play a game with 120 college kids, you're not going to put them right near Dublin in the Temple Bar area. So we were in some hotel on the countryside, and I had to wake up every morning getting ready to go to practice, seeing you and the rest of our football staffers all bleary-eyed from being out drunk the night before.
And Senior, you were drinking Guinness, right? Obviously.
Oh, yeah. Guinness. And my wife Chris was drinking Jameson and ginger, and we were bar hopping in the Temple Bar area. Oh yeah, it was. We did it in 2012, and we did it last year, and we didn't miss a beat. So yes, we didn't get secluded away in a hotel. We got to have fun, and we've made it. One of the toughest days is probably the second day after the Super Bowl, because the day after the Super Bowl, you talk about the Super Bowl. And then the next day, you start withdrawal of, oh my God, we have got to wait months until there's real football again. Now we are on the precipice of real football again. We've made it. We have made it to live football. I don't mean preseason games and camps, in college camps and fall camps and NFL teams practicing against each other. I mean, real games. Starts tomorrow at noon. We have made it. You can sit on your couch. Games are for real until we go into February again till the Super Bowl. So we've made it through the withdrawal. We've made it through the drought, and everybody can kind of take that breath and say, yeah, here we go.
Yeah, we'll settle into being ungrateful and complaining about the lack of juice in the slate right around week 3. But for now, we're going to sit around and we're going to watch Florida State at Georgia Tech starting at noon Eastern. We're going to watch Montana State on the road against New Mexico at 4 o'clock Eastern. SMU, the ACC's very own, on the road at Nevada at 8 o'clock Eastern on CBS Sports. And then Delaware State, they are en route. I believe they have made it to Hawaii after the bus snafu that took the nation by storm the other day. So Delaware State going to go on the road as almost I think 30-point underdog in Hawaii.
Yeah,
but Dad, they made it to Hawaii. So congratulations to everybody. We all made it through the wilderness too.
And let the full-scale gambling begin.
Yes, exactly. And
Dad,
speaking of money, why don't we talk about something interesting that also happened in college football yesterday? This is a sport that has no problem and no issues creating some of the most insane Mad Lib headlines that you will ever see. And yesterday was no different in that. Colorado is going to be a team that we talk about a lot this season, at least for a little while, because they have mastered the art of interesting and because Deion Sanders is there and he is also inherently interesting. But we had this article in Sports Illustrated yesterday, Jeff Hauser and Jason Jones, the article that Colorado, a former staffer, sought NIL funding from the Saudi Arabia PIF in an unprecedented move. Essentially, what had happened was Trevor Riley, the now former Colorado special teams coordinator, had resigned back on August 1st and authored in his letter of recommendation on record saying that he had tried to pull funding in for the school's NIL collective by going over and meeting with the Saudis. In the lines directly from this guy's letter, Dad, he said, "You guys paid me $90,000 a year and let me handle special teams, and I did all my work in your name and was told to pursue it. I burned through all of my contacts in the Mormon community, which is worth about $3 trillion. Now I can't get these people to answer my calls just because I found out today none of my endeavors will happen. I went to Saudi Arabia and got a meeting with the Saudis who were interested in pursuing business. I have email receipts to prove it, and you guys let it fell flat on my face." So, Dad, this guy essentially saying, you brought me here to do NIL work for the collective. I said, pay me to be the special teams coordinator as well, and I went out and did all of this and didn't get the support on the home front now. Now, this person claims to have acted alone in going and trying to secure funding for this from the Saudi Arabian PIF fund. Whether or not you believe that, Dad, how stunned are you that we are already at the point where this is leaking its way over to college football?
I'm stunned it took this long, quite honestly. I mean, we thought of collectives, again, not associated with the school, but collectives to pay these players, mainly the football players, the big money, with alumni and boosters and people that were part of the program. But not now we see, the term venture capitalists, possibly getting involved. So why should this, when the whole live thing started, understand, the PIF, the Saudis, they own international soccer teams outright. They have their hand in the ATP golf. They have their hand in Formula One. They have their hand in ATP tennis. And they have their hand in golf, obviously with live as well. So they have their hand in professional sports. There's the initial, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this, to where we are now. To where we are, where Rory McIlroy spoke up for the PGA and was disgusted with the players who went to live, to him backing down completely on it and basically saying, oh, well, if you can't beat them, I'm not going to join them, but I'm going to stop complaining about it. So there's outrage, and then there's no outrage. So if this were to happen, if the Saudis were to fund the Colorado program, there would be initial outrage, and then there would be none. That's how we work, right? That's how we work. They already have their fingers in a lot of different sports pies, for their sports washing, ventures, whatever they're trying to do. We all kind of know it, and we all get outraged, and then we don't get outraged. The news cycle moves on. So I'm surprised it took this long of somebody looking for fun. And boy, would that change the landscape to get PIF involved in funding, not for the top players, but for all the players, and how that could change recruiting. So I'm not surprised it happened. I'm surprised it took this long to happen, quite honestly.
Yeah, again, this is very new information, and this person is saying in the letter, the now former special teams coach, that they acted alone, did nothing illegal, was just trying to work in the school's best interest. And so I'll kind of leave that to the side because I don't know what to make of who all might have been involved or what have you, or anything that would want to go down that path. But Dad, I'm with you. I said pretty much as soon as we started talking about this with Liv, that college football was a sport uniquely primed for this to kind of come in and sort of vulture it. Just the way the sport is set up, where I've always said, if you want to look, The Club is one of the most instructive books on sports I've ever read. It's about the English Premier League, but really, if you pull back a little bit, it sounds an awful lot like the structure of college football, in a big body with a few sports or a few teams that are actually in position to compete at a high level. And the only thing that helps you win at the end of the day is lots and lots of money. And for the Saudis who want to have their hands in a little bit, but not be the face of anything, Live Golf is kind of the outlier in that, but want to have power, want to have influence, but don't want to necessarily be the face of it, because that's not how sports washing works. College football seems like a great place to come in, dump a bunch of money into these amorphous blobs that are collectives right now, until we'll see if the rules change that all of a sudden limit what kind of deals you can get, the things that people are pushing for in that new world order post a lot of these legal issues in the courts. But yeah, no, Dad, this is not a surprise at all. It's a sad indictment on who we all are. That's 100% true in what you just brought up, but it is in no way surprising, and it is something that you're right, we saw coming a mile away.
Oh, absolutely. We talk about venture capitalists wanting to get involved in this, but they would say we wouldn't want a lot of control, but we all kind of raise an eyebrow at the control they would want to have. The PIF, they don't want control. They just want a sports wash. They just want to give their money and make it look like, look, we're giving our money to sports. They don't want control. They don't want to make the rules. So it's easier for a college collective to take their money, take the stench that goes along with it, ride it out, and then nothing is done. Nothing happens. Live is the perfect example of outrage to nothing. Outrage to not only nothing, to the Saudis and the PGA doing a deal together. I mean, that's where this has gone. So everybody wants to talk about outrage, but the outrage only lasts for so long.
Yep, and that's the goal. That's what they're banking on, that eventually money wins. And right now, that still seems to be the formula. So this right now is a nothing headline. It didn't come of anything. The PIF is not invested in Colorado's football program. This coach no longer works for the Buffaloes, and round we go. But it's just a little something to keep in mind, because I don't think this is going to be the only time this happens in a sport where the arms race is as vicious as it is in college football, and where people are as desperate as they are now to keep securing funding at a time where the business model is changing so very much. So that was one wild headline yesterday in the world of college football. Jesse, we did have another that's at least important to a team that is in one of the two biggest conferences in college football, and a team that is actually a competitor despite what people might think of with the jokes about their offense in Iowa and Kirk Ferentz.
Yeah, so everybody's trying to get an edge right now in college football, including the longest tenured coach. Here's Kirk Ferentz yesterday.
And the issue involved the communication with the player and his family. Prior to them entering the portal, or the player entering the portal. We spent the past several months cooperating with the NCAA and, reviewed the matter. And based on those discussions, the communication has been determined to be a potential level 2 NCAA violation. So therefore, I've made the decision in conjunction with the athletic director to recommend a self-imposed 1-game suspension, and also including a loss of 1 week off-campus recruiting. But the bottom line is this: I tell our players, we abide by the rules, and in this specific case, I did not do that. I made a mistake during the recruiting process. I want to apologize to our players, coaching staff, university leadership, and our incredible fans.
So guys, how big a deal is this in today's climate? Seems relatively minor. I also want to point out, obviously, it's a self-imposed penalty. So they consulted with the NCAA about this, but it is self-imposed, and the NCAA investigation is ongoing.
Yeah, Dad, it's one of those things that I don't think this is a very big deal. It's just wild that a standing Power 4 head football coach, really Power 2, a standing Power 2 head football coach really stood up and copped to it. Like, we know everyone's doing this. We hear coaches complain about it all the time, that there's illegal recruiting going on before guys hop in the portal. But usually they die with the lie, baby. And Kirk Ferentz actually stood up here, and I guess in an effort, to Jesse's point, most of this trying to get out ahead of this stuff is trying to make sure the NCAA doesn't feel like they need to go and punish you further. We just saw with Michigan. What did they really get banged for? Lying when it came time to talk. And so Iowa was saying, look, we're being truthful. I'm Kirk Ferentz. I am lying prostrate in front of the congregation, begging for forgiveness here in front of all you, so that this is the end of it, and they only got to have him miss one game at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I mean, ask for forgiveness, right? I mean, that's what he's doing. You know, instead of Michigan is the example of don't perpetuate the lie, because the lie is going to cost you more than the actual, infringement that you've done. And this is a level 2. This isn't anything crazy. And you're going to get nailed for it. So why not get in front of it and suspend yourself for the Illinois State game? I mean, it's and I don't know if the NCAA will do more, but the NCAA definitely looks favorable on a team and a coach that cops to it. Yeah, we messed up. We'll take a week off of, out of season recruiting, and me and the wide receiver coach, John Budmeyer, I believe his name is, Budmeyer, will sit the first game against Illinois State. So yeah, that's you're going to get nailed. Don't lie, because the lie, I mean, this is parenting 101, right? I mean, when you teach your kids, I mean, your kid's going to get in more trouble for lying about a situation than telling the truth. But lying seems easier at the time because you're still not in trouble if you can get your parents to believe the lie. But normally the parents aren't going to believe the lie, and you get yourself into more trouble. It's just the same thing in a grown-up version of NCAA football. So they got out in front of it. They, as you said, they laid out in front of the NCAA, said, yes, sir, we did it. I confess we did it. We'll sit the first game against Illinois State.
Yeah, no, I'm not overly worried about this. The Iowa problems are going to be more with what the offense ends up looking like this year, the new coordinator, and with all of this at the helm. So Kirk missing a game at this point, not really on anyone's radar. They're more focused on the fact that Brian Ferentz is not going to be on the sidelines anymore this season here. So that's the off-field news that we've had going on. But as we mentioned, this is about the game leading into the weekend. We'll get a lot more into the big game and the breakdown of it with Roddy Jones coming up in a little bit. But Jesse, why don't we cash or trash this thing right now? We'll put our pick on wax to start the day off here with Florida State and Georgia Tech.
Yeah, so Seminoles 10.5-point favorites. First college football game, first college football bet of the season. Like you said, let's cash it or trash it. Cash it or trash it is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Guys, the line opened at 13 points. A lot of money coming in on the Yellow Jackets. So are you going with the underdogs to cover? What do we think?
I am not. As much as, Dad, I like this Georgia Tech offense especially. There's some fun parts on this to watch in the backfield if you want to take care between the quarterback and the running back. But I just think now that it's especially down to 10.5 here, I like Florida State here. I think ultimately the talent's going to will out. DJU is a veteran player, so while there's going to be some growing pains, I think he comes in still with a higher floor than most, an offensive line with 190 starts against the Georgia Tech defense that's changed some things around, but personnel-wise, I just don't think can party with a team of this caliber yet.
Yeah, you look at Florida State and what they lost, quarterback, running back, 2 wide receivers, defensive players all over the place. But the portal, 5 Alabama players that they've pulled in on both offense and defense. So they replaced. They are doing well in the portal recruiting as well as recruiting. So and it's just a matter then of getting players to play together and learning a new system together, depending on when those transfers get in there, because there are no preseason games of everybody getting on the same page. These week 1, week 2 games are, and all games are about mistakes. He who makes the least mistakes wins. But in the first couple of games, because there aren't any preseason games, that really kind of magnifies itself. So I do like Florida State eventually just taking charge in this game and covering the 10.5. So I'll cash that we're cashing that they'll cover the 10.5.
Yeah, I'm going to say, so we're both in on Florida State to start the season. We'll see if that's because we have them in our larger playoff field, as we'll put those picks on wax later today. We'll give you all 12 in our expanded playoff of the team that we think are going to make the CFP coming up this year. It's new and exciting. There's a lot of new coming up this year. We're all going to get to work through some interesting things. How many times these teams all end up playing each other. How much the committee factors that in now that conference championships have a different meaning. Going to be a great time. Coming up next, though, let's check out that preseason game last night and some new money coming out for some of the best beef in the league.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Fellas, we had two preseason games in the NFL last night. Colts, Bengals, Bears, Chiefs. What takeaways do you have? Anthony Richardson went out there, led a touchdown drive on his first series against the Bengals. Everybody's like, wow. Then he struggled for the rest of the night.
Yeah, Dad, Anthony Richardson's the one to, I think, really hone in on here. We'll get to, certainly, for the Bears and Chiefs game, the biggest story there is going to be the Creed Humphrey payday that I want to talk about. Obviously, we want to send our well wishes to Chicago Bears defensive end Douglas Coleman III, who was hospitalized last night after suffering a pretty scary injury on a tackle during that preseason game late in the game. So we're glad to see he was moving extremities in the hospital, so hopefully we can continue to get good news on that front, as that's obviously the most important thing that happened last night with a young man's health and safety on the line there, certainly. But as we transition to the normal football side of things, Dad, how should Colts fans feel about Anthony Richardson waking up this morning after what will be their final look at him in games that don't matter?
Well, I mean, the games that don't matter is against the second and third string defense. The starters didn't play for Cincinnati. And he took them right down the field. I mean, his first pass was just a bullet over the middle. He threw some nice passes. He threw some good passes throughout the game, but had the, as he said, miscommunication on the interception by the goal line, a little hook route, and then the receiver was either supposed to lean to the outside or the inside. The receiver went outside, and Anthony Richardson threw inside, threw an easy pick six. So that was just a miscommunication. I don't put a lot into that as a bad throw because there were some other bad throws, low throws, high throws. That was just a miscommunicated throw. I mean, listen, we knew there was going to be some growing pains with only 4 games last year. Now he did rehab most of the season, so he had a lot of the offseason to work. And I'm sure there are Colt fans that are seeing other rookie quarterbacks perform well, i.e. Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, and saying, wait a minute, our guy who is still kind of a rookie, we think he should be performing better. So, I mean, I think worry's the wrong word because the expectation wasn't that he was going to be all of a sudden an MVP candidate. So I think this team has issues, but they have weapons on offense, and the defense certainly needs some work, but they do have weapons on offense. So I'm not going to signal the worry meter too much until the regular season starts because he did throw the ball relatively well at times last night.
Yeah, I don't think they should feel worried. I think they should get used to whatever this feeling is because I think this is going to be the pervasive feeling for the entire year, which is a mix of excitement and a little bit worry. It's that nervous energy that comes with doing anything new. Because for Anthony Richardson, to your point, this is all still, for the most part, very, very new. And you saw that last night. There's a guy who's got a lot of speed on his fastball and not much touch on the off-speed pitches. A guy where some of the accuracy, not in terms of finding the right guy, but of getting the ball in the right spot, suffers in certain instances here. This offense is going to run a ton of RPO action. We knew that with Shane Steichen coming over. We saw it on display last night time and time again. And he works pretty well in this. And with the legs factor in there, it's going to work pretty well. I do think, Dad, the feeling I came away with overall was still, and we talked about this a little bit the other day, slight confusion of the fact that the Colts are such heavy favorites over a team like the Tennessee Titans in the AFC South.
Yeah.
Where the Colts, plus 310, third best odds in that to win the division. The Titans, plus 1,000. Way behind, despite the fact that they also have a second-year quarterback going into this situation, behind a team that's got, new coach, new coordinators on both sides of the ball. There's a lot of newness I get for a team and a roster that was sort of in flux, that did a lot in free agency, bringing guys like Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard over here, and we're not sure exactly how effective they still are at this point in their careers, but the fact that with the Colts and Anthony Richardson, you're going to have to deal with this, I think, for a while. The first quarter of the season we always talk about as sort of an extended preseason. I think for the Colts, that's especially true. And as long as Anthony Richardson comes out healthy, I would feel pretty good about whatever it is because you're going to have to understand this is the cost of doing business with this particular player that you drafted.
And I agree about Tennessee kind of flying under the radar, and I'm sure Brian Callahan is happy about that. There's so low expectations for that team where there are higher expectations, obviously, for the Colts. So I think he's happy to fly under the radar. But I agree. I'm surprised there's that distance between the Colts and Tennessee. Yeah, I'm not hitting the worry meter at this point at all. The quarterback has some growing to do. I mean, I think it's crazy to put too much, or at times too little, but more too much on preseason games.
We're going to have to get Mike Golic Sr.'s worry meter up at some point. This is now the second or third time it's been referenced already today. That might be our metric for success for the year later on. The metric for success usually for other people is money. So Anthony Richardson, we will put aside. I think that is still developmental project right now. Even if he's further along and a little bit different than people wanted to characterize him coming out, that's a guy that's still going to need time. Dad, a guy that came in and paid almost immediate dividends for his team, now is getting paid actual money to continue to play for his team. Creed Humphrey, the center for the two-time defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, got locked up yesterday by his team, a 4-year, $72 million deal with $50 million guaranteed, largely considered one of the best, if not the best center in the league, especially now that Jason Kelce has retired. Yep. So, Dad, we've talked about the core of this roster that Kansas City continues to maintain and solidify here. What is the biggest enemy to these guys three-peating at this point?
Themselves. I mean, really themselves. Because, listen, we had so many questions about the offense and the firepower, and even to the point Pat Mahomes said he didn't have much fun because there was a defensive-led team last year. Now, they have, with Xavier Worthy, they seem to have a deep threat. Rashee Rice is now in his second year after proving himself his rookie year. You still have Travis Kelce. You still have your O-line led by Creed Humphrey. It was Humphrey in the AFC and Kelce in the NFC that were the best centers in the league. And Creed is, 25? I mean, I think the dude is just really incredible. So, yeah, I think they're their own worst enemies. Their defense played incredible last year, so they're clearly the favorites. So when you're the favorites, it's really A, injury, which you can't prognosticate, and then B is play. And when you have Patrick Mahomes, you're always in it. You always have a shot. So I would say they are their worst enemy, not another team in the AFC, because you can go through the litany of teams, be it Baltimore, be it Cincinnati, be it Buffalo, if they can. But I think they're clearly the best team. So they would have to be their own worst enemy.
Yeah, and we saw last year the lack of a receiving core came close to undermining them now, and they went out and addressed it. I think we've traditionally seen the one thing that can sort of undermine this group is when you've got cracks in the foundation up front. When they've lost, it's been when the offensive line was in flux. And what did they do? They went out and drafted Creed and Trey Smith, and they got Trey at a bargain because we know he was dealing with health issues coming out of college. That's going to be interesting if they can pay both of them, and I think they should try and make heaven and earth to do so. I heard our buddy Jordan Rodriguez from The Athletic on with Greg Rosenthal on NFL Daily the other day say, pay your big boys, draft everywhere else. It's a lot harder to find them than it is the small guys in the perimeter. And I tend to agree with Jordan. I am very biased on that front. But, Dad, that's why I think the most interesting player for them, Creed, yeah, you absolutely needed to do this. Securing Patrick Mahomes' lefty best buddy up front, important stuff. Kingsley Suamataia is getting ready to start as a rookie at left tackle for them, replacing Donovan Smith last year. And we saw when Donovan Smith, while he wasn't the all-world left tackle, when he went out, the offense did look a little bit different. They had to do some different stuff. Kingsley is a stud athlete. He walks into an O-line room where Andy Heck is a great coach. The rest of that group has great pedigree and is going to help him out. And this offense can do a lot naturally with tight ends and motion and Patrick Mahomes to help a rookie tackle out. But that is still going to be a big storyline to pay attention to with him and Juwan Taylor on the edges. Can they continue to hold up in a way that allows Pat to get back to some of those downfield throws to Xavier Worthy and a hopefully healthy Hollywood Brown that have made this offense what it was in the past and what we know a frustrated Mahomes from last year wants to get back to. So that was the takeaways from last night. Coming up next, we're going to look ahead to the rest of the final preseason dress rehearsal and see what we should have our eyes on here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We got a trade in division. Jahan Dotson going to Philly. Finally got that wide receiver trade we've all been waiting for, right, guys? Just kidding. Eagles and Commanders completing a very rare, curious in-division trade deal. So what do we think this does for the NFC East, guys?
Dad doesn't really move the Richter scale a whole lot for me. I don't know if that's the proper reference or not, but we're going to go with it here. Jahan Dotson, obviously a former big name, high profile pick, which Howie Roseman loves him some of that, but the last couple of years, never over 50 receptions, never over 600 receiving yards. And so a player that certainly now the job gets a lot easier when you're going over and tasked with just being an ancillary option in a Philadelphia offense that we know is helmed by two of the best in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Yeah, this just gives the Eagles another piece. Obviously, he wasn't in the plans for Washington, so they got something for him, and he's another piece for the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, he's obviously not one or two in this equation, but, you know, maybe that'll fit what his worth is to the team by being that third option. You know, it's tough to take two receivers out, to take A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith out of the offensive playbook by a defense. So I don't think Dotson's ever going to be the number one threat, but it's another piece. It's another piece in their puzzle of, boy, oh boy, they no excuses for them. I've said this. I think Dallas takes a step back. I don't think Washington or the Giants are there. I think this is Philly's division, without question, and not stopping at division, a chance to get back to the Super Bowl. Not because of this move. This just stockpiles talent on the team.
Yeah, I think stockpile, and we see a lot of the best teams do this. You stockpile and add talent that basically is taking a low-risk flyer on a position you already have strength at to see if you can make it an even bigger strength by isolating a role for a player like that. So we'll wait and see. It's a great opportunity for Jahan Dotson. I saw the post went viral of him from earlier when they posted the graphic of the entire Eagles offense, now with Saquon Barkley added in, with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And he said, whose Madden Ultimate team is this? Basically a testament to the strength of the roster that he is now a part of. So it's a reminder. Tweet things into existence. Manifest online. It is your God-given right as an American in 2024. Dad, while that is interesting and noteworthy because it's in the division, which, again, you can't poo-poo too much. I know a lot of people are saying, hey, Washington probably knows something if they're willing to part with a former pretty high draft pick. Well, you know, we saw the Vikings and the Detroit Lions and the T.J. Hawkinson trade not too long ago, and that seems to have still worked out. T.J. Hawkinson's been a productive player, so it is possible for that to happen, even if this is a rare occurrence. As far as the rest of the preseason now, Dad, it's a reminder for everybody, we got only 3 preseason games at this juncture. So what used to be the formula of, hey, preseason 1 and 2 was the ramp up, preseason 3 was the dress rehearsal, and then preseason 4, you get the young guys in, you do a lot of the last minute, dotting T's and crossing I's before you go and make the big roster cuts. Now it's a lot of people having different approaches and thought process about this. Some played their starters last week. Some, like the Carolina Panthers, are going to potentially play them this week. And Dad, in terms of what we're most interested in for this final weekend before they do the one roster cut now, they got to take it from 90 down to what they're going to have in the main roster plus the practice squad players all in one fell swoop after this weekend here. I do think for me it begins with the Carolina Panthers, where Dave Canales announced that Bryce Young and the starters are going to play long enough to, in his mind, I want him to at least get a little bit sweaty. And for all of us who have had a lot of intrigue in Bryce Young and haven't heard much nationally over the course of the preseason about the second-year former number 1 overall pick, I just want to see what it looks like. We've said over and over again, the preseason, you can only tell so much, but I just want to see something from a guy who is now with the head coach, who was the coordinator, who was a part of quarterback reclamation projects before. What about you?
Well, I mean, my expectations aren't too high. Let me put it that way. A, it's a preseason game, and B, just for Carolina, the expectations aren't too high. It's not like they rebuilt into an incredible team. Hell, they got rid of Brian Burns, their best player on defense. So it's still a reclamation project to me. So to see, the biggest thing you want to see is just a steady improvement by Bryce Young. I mean, that's, and my expectations are not high at all. I still think they're going to be the worst team in the league. So the expectations are high, unlike to me, Pittsburgh. This is the only. I don't believe there's a competition with Jacoby Brissett and Drake May. I think Jacoby Brissett's going to be the starter, but there is an actual competition in Pittsburgh. Russell Wilson starting this last preseason game. I mean, these are two quarterbacks in Fields and Wilson who are battling, two big, name quarterbacks who are battling for a starting spot. So this is really the one I'm keeping my eye on. Carolina is going to go down the road again of being one of the worst teams, and you're looking for incremental, hopefully more than incremental improvement. But who's going to lead Pittsburgh, the young upstart or the old veteran?
Dad, more like, all right, I'm trying to think of this on the fly right now, because we have, with both of these teams, the Carolina Panthers win total on DraftKings Sportsbook set at 5.5 right now. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers play in what could be argued as the toughest division in football. I think the Norths in general, two incredibly difficult divisions considering the depth of talent there. For the AFC North, you've got Joe Burrow coming back on a Cincinnati team that's got renewed hope, worst to first potential in that division here. What do you think is more likely? The Carolina Panthers win and hit the over on that win total, or the Pittsburgh Steelers miss the playoffs this year?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I would have to say that Pittsburgh misses the playoffs. I mean, and they could still get 9 wins and miss the playoffs. I mean, they could and keep Mike Tomlin's streak going of a 500 or better record. But I just don't know. I just don't know the talent level there. Quite honestly, I think they both could be. I think the under could be for both. Carolina under 5.5 wins and Pittsburgh not making the playoffs. But it's with either quarterback starting, there's issues with both quarterbacks who are starting. Obviously, you have issues with the offensive line. You have an injured running back as well. So they, in what you mentioned, and you're right, the toughest division in all of football. So it's a bit of an uphill battle for them.
Yeah, I'll extend some grace to the Steelers because I understand Troy Fautanu not in line. I mean, probably in line to be one of the guys early on there, and maybe some things were jumbled around. But man, the images of what Buffalo did to that offensive front are going to live rent-free in my mind until the Steelers do something about that at the start of the regular season. So yeah, Dad, I'm worried about that team in that division where, listen, there are people that think the Ravens might take a step back this year because of all the offensive line loss and coaching loss on defense. Obviously, you've got the Cleveland Browns who, Deshaun Watson, we're hearing about shoulder soreness in practice now. And they're putting out statements saying all the right things. But given his injury history and how important this season is, every headline we hear about that right shoulder for Deshaun Watson is of importance. And then obviously the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow. It's simultaneously, Dad, a very tough division, but also one that feels like it's hanging on a knife's edge at every single moment.
I agree. Deshaun Watson is a big question mark. Joe Burrow with his injury. Jamar Chase, is he going to sit, which would be devastating for that team? I agree. Obviously, Pittsburgh with the quarterback situation we talked about. Baltimore, they seem to be in pretty good shape at this point. But yeah, for what is considered the best division, there are definitely some cracks in the armor on all the teams.
Yeah, Baltimore is an interesting one because losing as many, I think 3 offensive linemen, having 2 new ones in there as starters on their front that they've jumbled around between young players and guys moving around positions, it is daunting. At the same time, I do think having Lamar Jackson, who's a big play waiting to happen, both in the run and pass in the backfield, and Derrick Henry now, who's one of the best in terms of yards after contact, all of those things help get a defense on their heels in a way that's incredibly advantageous for a young offensive line, a new offensive line. You combine that with Mark Andrews being back healthy, and I think kind of like we talked about with the Chiefs, they've got the right pieces and certainly the right coordinator now in Todd Monken to help offset some of that and keep them competitive. But either way, those are, I think, the big headlines watching going into the final weekend of the preseason here. But coming up next, this feels like the final weekend of the summer too, so we want to take one more trip to the water cooler with you guys and cool off before we get to the heat of late August. Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Summer is wrapping up, so let's spend one last Friday sitting around the cooler, swapping stories, having a cold one. I wish. Guys, let's start in Salem, Massachusetts, home of witches. I don't know. So Salem designated August 21st as Sean Stellato Day. So Stellato is from Salem. Now, this is very important, okay, because it represents the first time the city is honoring a living person with a designated day. Normally, it's a dead person, you guys. So, big day for Sean Stellato, who is very much alive.
Yeah, and for anyone that forgets, last time on Dragon Ball Z, Sean Stellato is Tommy DeVito's agent in an exercise of Italian pride over the course of last year's NFL season, where Tommy DeVito came in for the New York Giants and took the world by storm, and his incredibly in-character agent, Sean Stellato, garnered a lot of fame as well. Yeah, now, Dad, they're giving him a whole ass day out here, and it's a weird precedent to set here, considering some of the others, as Jesse said, were all dead when this happened. Jack Welch of General Electric, Zach Sanford of the NHL, Brian St. Pierre in the NFL, Rick Brunson in the NBA, Scotty Bozek from the Olympics. But, I guess it's one of those things. You got to keep up with the times right now. And this guy did garner a lot of attention. I didn't realize he was still receiving it.
Not a who's who list of other notables who had their day, post-mortem. I guess this is one where they want to actually have the living person there and honor them and have them talk. I guess I don't know. It seems a little bit odd, though. It does.
Oh, okay. Those are just other notable people. I just got the note in my ear that those people don't actually have a day. They are just people of note who might also deserve this here. So I stand corrected on that. Either way, for Sean Stellato, very thrilled for him in this moment. I'll be interested, Dad, what else comes of this here, because Tommy DeVito probably shouldn't or won't see the field again, barring catastrophic things happening for the New York Giants. So kudos to Sean and kudos to Tommy for making this thing last as long as it possibly can there. Great for them. Pumped for them on that one.
Yeah, their 15 minutes turned into an hour of fame. So, congrats to them for that.
Yeah, Salem now going to be known for Sean Stellato and witches. What a time to be alive.
Shout out to witches. Jesse, let's get to our next bite from the cooler here. What do we got? I guess it's a drink, not a bite.
We'll take another sip from the cooler here with gold medalist, pommel horse guy, Steven Nedorosik is joining the cast of Dancing with the Stars. How perfect, you guys. Brand deals, don't need them. Straight to Dancing with the Stars. And he said when this was announced, he was like, I want to bring some gymnastics, maybe do some backflips. Like, can you imagine the type of athleticism that he is going to bring to Dancing with the Stars?
Oh, yeah, Dad. And listen, this Dancing with the Stars has a well-worn history of athletes performing at a very high level here. I do think I laugh because when he says, I want to bring some backflips and gymnastics to it, when we met him, the whole sell was, hey, this guy just does pommel horse. This is Ken, and his job is pommel horse. But it's like, and I always remember Tim Legler used to tell this story at ESPN about getting chirped by a guy at the checkout counter at the grocery store, because in the NBA, he was a three-point specialist. You see a lot of guys siphon into these certain roles, but as he always would point out, hey, I had to be so good at the rest of this just to get here that compared to a layperson, I'm nice with all of this. So Steven is the same way where, now that he's on the Olympic stage, he does pommel horse. He does the things specific to that. But I'm sure that dude has all of the other gymnastic tools in his bag enough to wow us on the dancing stage.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. The biggest question to me is he going to be dancing with his glasses on or off? We know he has the eye condition, but that's why he wears his glasses. But the pommel horse is the feel thing. He always has his hands on the pommel horse, so he can do it without his glasses. But at times he'll be away from the dancer, doing his own thing, and then reconnecting with the dancer. Will he have to have his glasses on? And there'll be a lot of movement with gymnastics, because you're right. Sport, especially football players. I think at least 3 former football players, have won this event. So athletes tend to do well in this.
No, they do. And it makes sense. The baseline athleticism it takes to do that job usually translates well into something else physically. The question with Steven, too, will be, he competes well on the pommel horse, moves very well. Rhythm is always the question I have. That's why I like certain parts of gymnastics when you have the ones that are a little more predicated on going to a song, especially what we see in women's gymnastics on the floor routine. I'm a little more comfortable with that. As far as the no glasses thing, it does present the opportunity. Everyone made the Clark Kent comparison. Take off his glasses, become Superman, all those things during the Olympics. We see plenty of themed dances on this show. I'd imagine we're going to get some sort of nod to that if he lasts long enough in this competition to get to that point. So there's a lot of stuff to play with. And dance is about feel anyway. What? It's about feeling the rhythm. It's about being in touch physically with your partner there. So he doesn't need the glasses for that. Why let sight get in the way of a thing like this rhythm?
Well, like I said, there'll be times when he's not connected with the dancer, and I don't know. And if he does have to wear the glasses, is he going to have a strap on the glasses because they get going in these dances? You don't want the glasses falling off. So
I wonder if he's ever been a
lot of questions
guy.
to answer. Yeah,
that'll be big time. That'll be big time. It's been a while since I've watched Dancing with the Stars. I'll probably wait for the clips to just hit the internet. If I'm being honest on this, it's one of those shows that good for everyone who still wants to tune in.
Yeah.
Probably ain't going to me, but I wish you well. Go with God. Jesse, let's get one more bite at the apple here. This is a sport that's interesting. The name we're about to mention, I think, is simultaneously one of the reasons for the sport's popularity, but also the reason a lot of the average fan in the U.S. all of a sudden started to look away because of the dominance of Max Verstappen in Formula One that he's indicating may be over sooner than we all expect.
Yeah, he said he's closer to the end of his career than the beginning. The 26-year-old Max Verstappen, he said closer to the end than to the beginning, okay? So he is heading into his 200th race. He's been at it for 10 years already. So, I mean, that sounds like, he's been doing it for 10 years. Sure, it makes sense that he's heading into, the twilight of his career. But no, he's not. Max Hamilton is still going strong. Not Max Hamilton, Lewis Hamilton, pardon me, still going strong at age 39. So, I don't know, guys. Seems like he could keep at it for a long time to come.
It seems the year, there's a record 24 races. It seems the seasons are have more races and becoming more demanding. They're changing some of the regulations in the next couple of years, I think in 25 and 26 or 26 and 27, and he wants to wait and see what effect those have. He hasn't been as dominant as he's been. He's only won 2 of his last 7 races. He hasn't won since June. So, are the other drivers and manufacturers, catching up to Max? He just had his 200th race. Nobody has had 400. Fernando Alonso is set to go in his 395th race. He's 43 years old. Lewis Hamilton has 347 races. So Max is way, way short of that, but he's been dominant. Not as dominant as the run Lewis Hamilton had, but, it's what have you done for me lately? And it's been Max Verstappen. But not as of late. As I mentioned, over the last couple of years, he's been the champ. But as of late, 2 of the last 7 where he's won the championship. So that would be interesting. He's 26 we said he is. He's got his contract through 2028, which he's going to do. It's not like this immediate retirement thing. He's going to go through at least his contract in 28. And he said he'd still, if he got out of Formula One, he'd still like to be involved in kind of some racing that's a little less demanding, though I don't know many things you get in a car and go real fast that's less demanding.
No, I would agree. That seems counterintuitive, unless it's, I'm sure he could find ways to be creative given his passion for the sport. But also, to your point, Dad, it's not happening anytime soon. The question that prompted this heading into his 200th race was, could you see yourself being around for 200 more? And he quickly cut that off and was like, no, that is not going to be me, which I do think is a good reminder when you talk about Lewis Hamilton or these guys, or even in other sports, when we talk about Tom Brady. Those are outliers in terms of both their physical ability to do this, but also the mental and the desire to try and keep pushing through that and do the things necessary that you talk about all the time. The work in the off seasons, the stuff that we don't get to see, them working with the manufacturers and going through all the things and the specs on the cars to make it work, in addition to the physical toll. That ain't for everybody. And Max Verstappen, who's probably got more money than God at this point, who's accomplished a ton in the sport, saying, yeah, I'm probably not going to grind myself away at this into my 40s. Actually deeply relatable and something I kind of appreciate. So congratulations to them. We enjoyed the water cooler with you guys. Coming up next, we invite Roddy Jones into the water cooler to talk ball next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here for hour number 2 as we look ahead longingly to the college football season that gets started this weekend. We now bring in one of our friends, ESPN and ACC college football analyst and Georgia Tech legend, Roddy Jones, kind enough to join us now. And let me be the first person, I'm sure the first person clever enough to come up with this, as Roddy this fall going to be in the booth with Mark Jones, Quint Keshnich down on the sideline, pumped there. Roddy, I can't wait to keep up with the Joneses this fall. I'd assume I'm the first person to say that to you, right?
You are the first person to say that this year. A couple of years ago, I did a game with Jonesy, and I think he brought us on air saying, hey, it's Mark Jones hanging out with my cousin Roddy Jones. So we're going to do all kinds of stuff this fall. But fired up, man. Excited. We go to Colorado on Thursday next week. So I can't wait to get started.
Yeah, I apologize for my son and that reference. I'm glad I had no part of that. I separate myself from that. So listen, we get real football starting tomorrow until the end of the Super Bowl, and the real football involves your alma mater, of which you had 52 starts, ran all over the place for an incredible amount of yards and yards per carry, but taking on Florida State in the first game of the college football season. How you feeling about it?
I'm very nervous because I have no game to distract me from this game. I'm full fan mode this week, which is a dangerous place to be. And look, I feel really good about this Georgia Tech team holistically. Like, I feel great about the trajectory of the program. Brent Key's coming off of a season where he got a bowl win over UCF in the Gasparilla Bowl. They got their first 5-star recruit, the highest recruit since Calvin Johnson of the Brent Key era, and obviously one of the biggest recruits ever for Georgia Tech. They're coming off a record amount of fundraising in the offseason for the athletic department. There's a lot of excitement around this team. You got a quarterback in Haynes King that's really, really good, who had an incredible stat line a year ago. If he cuts down the turnovers, could be an ACC Player of the Year candidate. The thing is, you're playing a Florida State team that's loaded on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I was told this the other day, they have 7 guys that are 23 years of age or older on the offensive line alone. A ton of starts. That defensive line's got Patrick Payton, who's a projected probably day 2, day 1 pick in the NFL draft this upcoming year. Marvin Jones Jr., who's got a really high upside. They've got a tandem of corners that are 2 of the best in the country, in Fintrell Cypress and Azaria Thomas. So it's not ideal to get this team week 0. But if you're going to get this team on the schedule, I think week 0 is not a bad time because they got a lot to figure out offensively.
And you get the trip to Dublin. You get to go out there. I mean, none of the players are really going to get to enjoy themselves at all. I can tell you that from firsthand experience. But their parents, like my dad, will all get drunk in the bar district, and they'll have a great time with that. But Roddy, the Florida State side of this is fascinating to me because you said they've got all these veteran pieces coming back. They're a team with a ton of expectation this year, but there is also a ton of new, especially with the offensive weapons. You have seen and covered DJ Uiagalelei at the ACC Network. Happy 5-year anniversary to the ACC Net, by the way, from the other day. DJU was one of the guys that during the pandemic season, when Trevor Lawrence had to go down because of COVID missing games, first popped onto people's mind and they went, wow, look at the arm strength, look at the talent. It's obviously been a roller coaster ride since then with stops that have included last year at Oregon State and now here at Florida State. So at this point, what do you think the ceiling can realistically look like for DJ now in his career?
I think he could have the best season of his career. I don't think the ceiling is ACC Player of the Year. But I do think that he could have a really good season. A lot of that, for me, goes back to the faith in Mike Norvell and what he has done offensively throughout his career. I mean, obviously, he's had Jordan Travis his entire career at Florida State with some Mackenzie Milton sprinkled in there. But you go back to Memphis, and he had Brady White and Riley Ferguson, very different quarterbacks than Jordan Travis. Those were incredibly productive offenses that obviously got him the Florida State job. The way he utilized the running backs in those offenses was really impressive. Moved his pieces around was really impressive. So I think Mike Norvell will do that. I think they're going to rely on that old, experienced offensive line. They're going to run the football with a couple of running backs, Roydell Williams, the transfer from Alabama, and Lawrence Toafili, who's just been a good soldier there as kind of the number 2 back for the last 3 seasons. He's sort of a multifaceted piece that can do a lot of different stuff. I think those 2 guys will be the feature parts of the offense. And with DJ, you're going to do what he does well. You're going to throw deep routes down the field, deep over routes, something that he's really pretty good at, layering the ball over the linebackers and getting it to his receivers coming across the field. You're going to avoid some of those short throws that Clemson had him do a lot that he sort of struggled with. Like, you got to hit those at a 70-80% clip if you're talking about a 5-yard out. That was what Clemson was so good with under Trevor Lawrence. 5-yard out to T. Higgins turned into a 9-yard gain. Now you're 2nd and 1. Well, DJ was missing a bunch of those, and they obviously didn't have T. Higgins. So it became 2nd and 10 instead of 2nd and 1. So they're going to avoid that. It's going to be more play action. I think shots down the field. I think they'll run him in the red zone sparingly, but he did become a better runner at Oregon State. So I do think DJ can have a better year because of Mike Norvell, because of the way this offense, I think, is going to be structured.
Florida State, the odds-on favorite to win the ACC. Who, in your mind, are a couple of teams that can challenge them for that title?
Yeah, I think Clemson and Miami are the two that come to mind. There are a couple more. NC State's kind of on the fringes of that. And there's people that believe in Virginia Tech. I need to see it a little bit with the Hokies. Louisville obviously participated in the ACC championship game last year and has a ton coming back on defense, but has retooled the offense significantly and had a big receiver go down for an extended period of time who had over 1,300 yards receiving last year at South Alabama. But I think it starts with Clemson and Miami. And I actually picked Clemson to win the league. I think Clemson's defense is the most talented unit in the entire conference. They've got 2 corners that are really talented. They've got 2 safeties that are likely going to be late draft picks in the NFL draft. They've got guys up front who are young, and Peter Woods and TJ Jennings, who I think have the TJ Parker, who I think have the ability to be day 2, day 1 picks down the line. Like these are prototypical Clemson defensive linemen that are going to play in the NFL. So they've got the impact. They've got some older guys, DeMonte Capehart, guys like that who have been around for a while, who will likely have an NFL career. And then offensively, Garrett Riley's 2nd year at Clemson with Cade Klubnik, who after starting for the first time as a full-time starter last year, went through a lot of growing pains. Now he's got the same offensive coordinator. I think there's some natural development there. So I like Clemson to win the league. And then you look at Miami, and I think they've got the highest ceiling. I don't trust them yet, but I think they've got the highest ceiling, especially with what they are offensively with that offensive line, the running back room with Damian Martinez coming over from Oregon State, Cam Ward coming over from Washington State at the quarterback position. I think it's got one of the highest ceilings at quarterback in the league. So those are the 2 teams I actually picked in my championship game, but Florida State is absolutely going to be there. They just have a sort of a tricky schedule. They start with Georgia Tech. They go to Boston College next week on a Monday, or they get Boston College at home next week on a Monday. So they're going to have to start fast in order to be in Charlotte.
Yeah, Castellanos. It's a league with a lot of really froggy quarterback play. Obviously, Caden Drones at Virginia Tech also. So it's an interesting conference, but by no means the only conference that you're going to be covering here. So you mentioned Clemson and Florida State, your pick in the ACC championship there. Roddy, big picture now with the 12-team playoff. Are they a 2-team league? Is there a chance they could sneak a third in there? Is it a 1-team league when it comes and all said and done? What do you think the ACC can do as all the other conferences outside of the Big Ten and the SEC are still kind of trying to assert their claim to being the next best conference in college football?
I think the ACC is a 2-team league with the potential for 3, but I think to feel good about getting 3 in, the ACC has to take care of Notre Dame. Because if Notre Dame is in the mix, I think everybody's ceiling. The SEC wants to get 4+ teams in. The Big Ten wants to get 4+ teams in. The Big 12 wants to get 2 or 3 in. I think everybody has to sort of take a step back from that if Notre Dame is in the mix. And the ACC, obviously, with the close relationship with Notre Dame, 5 ACC teams on the schedule, including Louisville and Florida State. The ACC has to have its hand in eliminating essentially Notre Dame from the playoff to feel good about 3, especially because 2 of those teams that are going to be in that mix, Florida State being one, potentially Louisville another, are going to be teams that are on Notre Dame's schedule. So if Notre Dame is 11-1, I think the ACC is almost certainly a 2-team league. If Notre Dame's sitting in there 10-2, 9-3, then I think there's some ACC losses in there, and the ACC could look to get 3. So I hate to bring up the fact that, like, you guys' alma mater, the place that you guys are the most proud of, is probably the thing that the ACC is going to have to take care of to get 3 teams in the playoff.
I mean, I feel like we've been public enemy number 1 around the ACC for a while now in terms of this. Notre Dame, obviously, against the non-Clemsons, has had a pretty stellar record since they've come over to the conference. And I feel like while it's been, hey, there's a relationship. We got our other sports that play in the ACC. They all do very well in there. It's good for the conference. You had the Olympians you could take credit for this last year. I don't feel like on the football side, there's a lot of love lost between the folks in South Bend and the folks at the ACC office.
There certainly is. And look, flag football in 2028, if there's any Notre Dame Dame participants on that flag football we are taking credit for that as well. They are ACC. They're ACC Olympians. I mean, we take them at every other sport.
You guys already took Katie Ledecky's gold medals from this last year, you monsters. They've been in the conference for 30 seconds.
In the ACC. She's an ACC legend there, Golic. Like, you don't take that away from us. Man, it's an interesting relationship. And I think part of the perception around the league the last, half decade plus has been the fact that Notre Dame was tremendous. Like, there were 27 straight wins at one point in the regular season against the ACC. Like, that just can't happen against any individual team. Notre Dame was the best team in the ACC when it joined the ACC in 2020 until Clemson was at full strength in the championship game. So look, that relationship has certainly been one that's been fruitful for the ACC outside of football. Even in football, it's been fruitful for the ACC at times as well. But now you're in direct competition against Notre Dame to get an additional team in the college football playoff.
What do you think of the future of the ACC with Clemson and Florida State suing their own conference and conference realignment that just went on and certainly to go on in the future? What's the future of that conference?
It's going to be interesting in the near term, or it's going to be interesting in the long term. I think in the near term, the conference is pretty settled. And I say that because it's going to take a while to go through the courts. The ACC does not seem like it is giving any ground towards a settlement in the courts. These court cases drag along for years. And so during that period of time, certainly through 2025, because they've already missed the deadline to withdraw by the 2025 season. So you're looking at 26 as the first season that you could have an ACC without Florida State or Clemson. So for the next 2 or 3 years, like, the ACC is going to be fine. And while that has gone on in the courts, the ACC has actually expanded its revenue distribution pretty significantly to the point where they're projecting that it could be upwards of $50 million per school in the fiscal year that they report next, which would be 23-24, I believe. And then going forward, they certainly feel good about it because now you get the markets of Texas and California as in-market rates for ACC Network, which is hundreds of millions of dollars for their existing contract, for the remainder of the contract for the ACC, which is going to close the gap some. It's not going to close it enough for Florida State and Clemson probably, but it's going to close it some. In the long term, I think there are some real questions. What happens when you get close enough of the grant of rights where Florida State says, hey, look, we are going to buy out the rest of it. It doesn't matter what the price is. So that's in the 2030s. Who knows where we'll be by that point? So I think long term, there's some questions about what the ACC is going to be and how they continue to keep this thing together. There's a feeling in ACC country that North Carolina is really the team that could decide the future of the league. You could absorb the losses of Florida State and Clemson and still have a league. North Carolina leaves, Virginia leaves. Now you've got some real issues, but they're both sitting on the sidelines waiting to see how the courts play out. So long term, I think it's really questionable, but in the short term, next 4 or 5 years, I think the ACC is going to look like it looks now.
The All Coast Conference in a very interesting place heading into this season for all the reasons that you mentioned there. The name just works so perfectly. I figure we got to put it to use at some point. But Roddy, as we mentioned off the top, you're going to be in a big booth covering a lot of games outside of the ACC footprint as well this fall. What is the thing you're most interested in around college football in general, ACC aside, heading into this season?
I think there's some really awesome big picture storylines. And honestly, I start in the Big 12. Like, who in the world is going to win the Big 12 is sort of the thing that I'm most interested in. I was going through this yesterday. There's probably 5 to 7 teams where you could talk to an average fan and they say, yeah, we're going to win the Big 12. I think you certainly start with Utah, with Kansas State. Kansas, 9 wins a year ago with a lot coming back on that team, has designs of winning. I think you go down to Arizona, one of the new entrants into the league. They certainly think they can win it. And there's a few. Oklahoma State, it's got their entire offensive line back, an offensive line that's about as old as Florida State's with the best running back in the country and Ollie Gordon coming back. If Alan Bowman can cut down the turnovers and that defense improves, I think they're certainly in the running. Iowa State, with a ton coming back on the offensive side of the football. Rocco Becht was a true freshman last year, one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. So you can just go down that conference and it is incredibly deep. And then there's wild cards like Colorado. Like, what are we going to get from Colorado? The offensive line looks like it's improved. How much we'll have to see, but that defensive line's legit. Like, it's for real. They are not blowing smoke when they feel good about that defensive line. So especially from a pass rush standpoint. So I think there's a ton of interesting teams in the Big 12. The new look SEC, you're going to get a ton of matchups consistently. And the SEC has sort of put out this, there've been these smoke signals coming out of maybe 4 teams in the playoff, maybe a 9-3 SEC team gets in over a 10-2 team from a different conference. I'm interested to see how that plays out, but I am a little skeptical on whether or not they'll have 4 teams in the running, because it feels like every team that's in contention to make the college football playoff, except for Missouri, is on Georgia's schedule. And if you feel like Georgia's the best team, then all of those teams are going to take a loss. Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss. Unless one of them is able to pull the upset against Georgia, then you're looking at a bunch of teams with at least one loss, and then you can't slip up anywhere else, or you can't have 2 slip ups if you're going to look for that. So I do feel like that SEC schedule, I'm really fascinated to see how it's going to play out. The Georgia side of it is the one criticism we've had through their run of dominance is the schedule has not been that hard. Well, it's a gauntlet this year. They are making up for it because a bunch of those games I just mentioned are on the road. So I'm fascinated to see how that plays out. And then the Big Ten is certainly interesting. Michigan's probably the most interesting one. How do they rebound? But this Ohio State team, some people have said, is the greatest collection of talent they've ever seen. And these are people like Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer saying that. Now, those 2 guys did see the 0-1 Miami team, so I think it's a little bit of recency bias. But Ohio State should certainly be loaded.
Best new team to a new conference that has a chance to win the conference: Oregon, Texas, Utah.
I'll go Utah because I feel really good about where that program is with Cam Rising at quarterback. They're not as talented on the top end in terms of NFL draft picks as maybe they have been in the past. But the reason I picked them over Oregon is because Oregon has to play Ohio State. And Ohio State, as I just mentioned, the greatest collection of talent that some coaches have ever seen. So I will go with them. I also think you can't sleep on Arizona in that league. Brett Brennan did a great job of keeping that group, that core nucleus group, together after Jed Fish went and took the Washington job. They kept Noah Fafita, who has been tremendous. They're 7-2 with Noah Fafita at quarterback. The 2 losses were to top 10 teams. They kept Tetaroa McMillan. They kept Jacob Manu. They kept a really good group of high level players. So I wouldn't sleep on Arizona winning the Big 12 either. But I think those 2. Utah and Arizona, probably the 2 that I feel best about winning the league. Oregon slightly behind. If they beat Ohio State, though, I completely change my tune and they will win the Big 12.
Yeah. I was going to say that game, by the way, in Eugene, too. So yes, Oregon's going to have their best shot at that early on, as we do get a bunch of the heavyweight matchups. The reason all the people wanted these big super conferences to form is so that we get a bunch of these helmet matchups early in the season. They'd be in conference, and we got it there. Roddy, we're going to do our 12-team playoff bracket coming up here in the next segment. Have you gone through that already? Have you picked who you think is going to win the title this year?
I have. I think Georgia wins it because I think they're the best team in the country. I think it's Georgia and Ohio State in the championship game. I'm real chalky, man. I'm so boring. But I do think there are going to be some interesting ones along the way. Like I think Miami is in the 12-team playoff this year. I think Clemson returns to the playoff. I think your Notre Dame makes the 12-team playoff, which will make for some great, really interesting matchups. The interesting thing to me is, the group of 5 now gets a representative, and while we sort of diluted the group of 5, taking UCF and Cincinnati and some of these teams, SMU, and putting them in the Power 5, I do think there's some really good teams. Liberty's going to be really good. Memphis should be really good. Boise State. So that I've gone through it. I'm real chalky at the top, but I do think there's going to be some interesting things in that 12 team and the teams that get in.
Nope. Like you said, it's going to be a fascinating exercise. And what does the committee value now in terms of which losses matter, especially when there's so many big-time common opponents like you talked about in the SEC? Roddy, appreciate the time as always, man. Congrats. Fired up to watch you and Mark and Quint this fall. Again, that first game, Colorado hosting North Dakota State, which is going to be a barn burner there. So good luck with that one. Enjoy the ride. We'll talk to you soon. All right, buddy?
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Love what you guys are doing. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, buddy. Always great stuff there. All right, so Roddy has the Georgia Bulldogs lifting the trophy and winning yet another title coming up this season. Coming up next, we'll put it on wax and tell you if we agree. We'll give you our 12-team field, our Final Four, and our national champions for the 24-25 college football season. Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Senior and GoJo gave us their conference champion predictions on Wednesday. So we have 5 teams headed to the expanded playoffs. Let's go back and remind you guys who everybody has going in. We're starting with GoJo. We got Georgia, Oregon, Utah, Florida State, and Boise State. As for Senior, looks pretty much the exact same here, except he's got Georgia, Ohio State, Utah, Florida State, and Boise State. So guys, conference champs is the easy part. Now let's name the other 7 teams headed to the expanded playoffs, because this college football season, we're feeling the cheesiest with Cheez-Its. So which teams will be baked into history in the inaugural 12-team playoff? Let's split this into 2 categories for you guys, okay? So your teams with a chance to win it all and your teams just looking to get in. Who you going with?
First off, I am salivating right now. Good to have my friends at Cheez-It back on board, man. I missed you guys. This is going to be fun for college football season with some of my favorite snacks of all time. White cheddar grooves, by the way, if anyone's wondering what my favorite flavor was out there. I don't know if you guys have strong opinions, but the grooves, if you haven't walked down that road before, my brothers and sisters in Christ, I promise you, the good word is out there if you are ready to receive it. So just want to put people on game for that one. But yeah, Dad, it is kind of 2 different categories of team that we have to talk about when we do this expanded playoff, because as I've said for a long time, college football playoff expansion is not about creating an opportunity where I think more teams have a realistic chance of winning the championship. That is still going to be predicated on the same things. The teams that have a depth and top end, high end of recruiting that outclass everybody else. Bud Elliott over at 24/7 has the blue chip ratio, the percentage of a team's roster made up of 4- and 5-star recruits over the last 4 seasons. That's been pretty predictive in terms of teams that are capable of winning a national championship, not making the playoff, but actually winning the games necessary to go ahead and hoist the trophy. So those are 2 different things. And Dad, when I look at that category of teams, I do think we're talking about obviously the Georgia Bulldogs, obviously Ohio State, Oregon, and then I think Texas in that mix as well, Alabama in that mix as well. And really after that, Dad, in terms of teams I think can realistically win a national title, that's probably where I'm comfortable pumping the brakes and saying everyone else is going to have to show me before I'm going to believe it.
Yeah, I would say Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Bama, Texas. I think that would kind of be it. I'm trying to see if I missed anybody, but I think I got them all. And you never know what can happen. Listen, you got to win a few games to win a title, so you never know which way the ball bounces. But I would say those are probably the more sure bets.
I just think depth is the thing that separates everyone else. And in this year, a lot of it is who you have returning at quarterback. For Michigan, there are major questions. That's still a team that's going to be built the right way under Sherrone Moore. The offensive line loses a ton of talent to the NFL, so we know they're replacing a lot, but that's a program that recruits and develops at that position a lot. The head coach is the offensive line coach, or the former offensive line coach now, so I don't worry about that. The defense is going to be sick on that side of the ball. But with a new quarterback coming in, we have questions to ask there. Ole Miss won 11 games last year, portaled incredibly well yet again, brings back, if you count the portal guys, like 10 guys on each side of the ball that have started meaningful games in college football. But they got to show us that they can get over that hump. Notre Dame's the same way. I love our alma mater, Dad, and I believe they've been one of the better teams in the college football playoff era overall, but that elite next step has still eluded them, and with the offensive line questions for that team going into week 1 already this year, I have questions that they're going to have to answer on that front before I buy into the defense, Riley Leonard, and the talent on the rest of that roster being capable of winning a national title the way we saw a program like Michigan that's in a very similar station in the sport get over the hump and win last year.
Yeah. I think the O-line is going to be an issue for Notre Dame as well. Let's see if that group can grow during the season. Again, the schedule is very favorable. If you're looking at an 11-1 season for Notre Dame, you're looking at the loss to be either the opening round at Texas A&M or the Florida State game in November, unless they can manage to go 12-0. So we'll see. It was fun coming up with the 12. Actually, number 12 was the easiest to come up with.
Yeah, I was going to say, so why don't we look at our 12 here and we can talk about the teams where just getting in is going to be a win because there are some up there. So these are each of our 12 teams in here. Both of us have the Georgia Bulldogs in at the top, as we mentioned. Ohio State and Oregon, the biggest difference for us in that first four. And remember, this year, we'll keep saying it because it's new, the five highest ranked conference champions make it into the dance. So the 4 Power 5 champions are going to get that first round bye. The highest ranked group of 5 champion going to make the playoff. That's why, to Dad's point, we both have Boise State coming out of the Mountain West as the best path, I think, to get to the college football playoff, to be that highest ranked G5 team. And likely because of the way that we're grading, and we know that we've seen from the committee, it's tremendously difficult for group of 5 teams, especially now the way the sport's reorg, to get into the dance. Them slotting in at 12 feels easy. After that, Dad, when we talk about outside that top 4, you and I obviously are on opposite sides of the Oregon-Ohio State coin, so we have them each getting in as the respective 5 seed in ours. And then I have Texas, Alabama, Notre Dame, Penn State, Miami, Ole Miss, and Boise State. So I've got the 4 SEC teams making it, with Ole Miss being that last one in there in a year that they're kind of like Penn State. Both of those teams I have making it, because really for them, for Miami, I would say Penn State, Ole Miss, and Miami, this is put up or shut up year. I don't think there are a lot of excuses out there. I get Penn State's replacing guys on the offensive line. There's some NFL talent lost on defense, but you've always had the talent. I think you've made the coaching change with Andy Kotelnicki to give your offense a good chance with Drew Aller at quarterback. I think with Miami, we've talked about the groundwork they've been laying for the last couple of years. And I think for Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin has been building to this the last couple of seasons. And now with Jackson Dart and a bit of an older roster, I get you lost Quinshon Judkins, but you've still got the talent and the offensive structure to absorb that. So if not now, then when, for those teams who I think that is the standard for success this year. If you're not talking about the expanded CFP for those teams, you're talking about real existential questions for those programs.
Yeah. I have one less SEC team and one more Big 12 team. My number 5 would be Oregon, and then 6 is Notre Dame, 7 is Texas, 8 is Penn State, 9 is Bama, 10 is Kansas State. I have them in there from the big. That could be Arizona, quite honestly. 11 Miami, and then 12 Boise State. So a lot of the same teams. Which again, you're asked to pick. You're not gonna really go out on a limb. It's gonna be close to chalk in some of the decisions. But and remember, seeding doesn't change. So no matter the upset, whatever, seeding does not change through this. And for those wondering why Boise State is 12, it's that 5th team and be that group of 5 team. Wherever they're ranked, if they say they're ranked 8th, they would be in the 8th slot. If they're ranked outside the top 12, they automatically get the 12th slot, and whoever was in the 12th slot gets bumped from the playoffs. That, at some point for the Power Fours, is going to be an issue.
And that's the source of dread. We talked about that G5 summit that was going on, where a lot of the group of 5 conference commissioners and brass got together to discuss, hey, what are we going to do if we get boxed out of this eventually? Because you're right, Dad. I saw Stephen Gottfried, who's part of Split Zone Duo, great college football podcast and reporter, say the other day, the college football expanded playoff is designed to get more of the big-time teams in, from the Big Ten, from the SEC. And if we're thinking about it in ways that we're maybe not always honest about at parties, that's probably the case. It's why I doubt that the Big 12 could be a 2-team league, even if Kansas State manages to overcome hockey line changing their O-line. If Avery Johnson does hit that way, if they don't win the conference, I think they're going to have a tough time getting in. And will those big-time power conferences look at the group of 5, who needs this? Financially, this is huge for whoever from the group of 5 makes into the dance. Are they going to look at that result, if that does happen to one of their teams, and sit kindly with that in a day and age where we're already talking about 14 teams and expanding this and changing the structure? I have my doubts, because again, this whole thing has kind of bled into a little bit of consolidation for the power up top. But those are our picks at GoJo and Golic. I'm sure you all agree wholeheartedly with everything that we've decided here and all the very smart choices that we've made right now. I'm sorry if your team didn't make the playoffs. I am not responsible for that. Take it up with somebody who cares. I'm just kidding. It's me. I care. I love you very much. Coming up next, though, we've talked a lot about football today. We are very excited about football this weekend. But Major League Baseball's got a couple of guys popping off right now. We'll look at some of the most impressive seasons potentially happening at the same damn time. Next on GoJo and Golic.
back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. Big baseball news yesterday. Mariners to part ways with manager Scott Servais. A disappointing season as they sit at 500, losing 8 of their last 10, sitting 7.5 games out of the wild card. So while he's not going to be part of the September run, let's talk about what we will be watching heading down the stretch, you guys, including the game's 2 biggest stars, right? Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, both of them chasing some history, very close to breaking some records here, guys.
Yeah, Dad, it's been a wild season overall. First off, my condolences to the Mariners fans in our life and maybe in your life out there who are used to their team unfortunately disappointing them down the stretch of the season, but been abysmal since June. The inevitable Houston Astros back in pole position. The Mariners 20-33 since June 18th. So bad times around there. Sad to see that happen that way. But Dad, for the names that Jesse just mentioned there, as we look down the stretch for this MLB season, Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, both, respective favorites to win. Judge, the odds-on favorite right now by a country mile for AL MVP, minus 2,000 on DraftKings Sportsbook, as is Shohei in the National League. These guys to both be on the cusp of record-setting seasons at the same time probably hasn't gotten the press it deserves, and it feels like, Dad, it is right in time for college football season. College football fans sitting around dreading the Aaron Judge cut-ins potentially here. As Dad, it doesn't seem like he's going to top his own mark from last year, but he's on pace right now to hit 60 home runs again, which would put him in some rarefied air. So of the two of these, as we look at Shohei Ohtani on his side, on the verge of a 40-40 season, 40 home runs, 40 stolen bases, and could go even further for that. He's on pace to hit that 40-40 mark faster than anyone who's done it in history, the other 5 people in that exclusive club. So which of these seasons has been most impressive to you so far?
Well, I mean, listen, Shohei only batting this year, not pitching because of the surgery that he had, and still, hitting dingers and stealing bases for a guy his size is really something. And he's at 39 home runs and 39 stolen bases. So he's going to get the 40-40. He could be the first player. He has 34 games left. He could be the first player to get the 45 and 45, which certainly would be something. It certainly wouldn't be shocking him to be a first at something, but he's certainly going to get to 40 and 40. The question will be, is it 45 and 45? Then you're talking about the only player to have done that, and it's a little more versatile than just home runs, of which Judge in 22 he broke Roger Maris's record of hitting 62. They have 34 games left. His pace is 60, as you said, but he's hit like 7 dingers in the last 10 games. So I mean, it's been ridiculous the last few games. So could he challenge that? And to your point about college football, get ready for the cut-ins if he starts to go on a home run streak and he's getting close to breaking his own record, the cut-ins during his at-bats. But I would probably lean towards Shohei because, the amount of home runs, I mean, he is sitting 9 back of Aaron Judge right now, so he is a ways back there, but he could go on a home run tear. But to add the stolen bases, again, with his size, the dude, you don't understand how big he is, and to have to join the 40-40 club and possibly be the lone participant in the 45-45 club, I think would separate him.
Yeah, to your point about pace, Dad, everyone else hit that 40-40 mark in like mid to late September. Shohei could do it before the calendar even hits that month, which is insane. And you're right, he's like a deer. It truly is terrifying when you see him up close, just how staggering. This is a legitimate athlete no matter what sport he would be playing that way. But for Aaron Judge, man, like we talk about the fascination with the long ball in this country in general. Obviously, that was always something that was lionized. That was the golden age of baseball in my childhood. But even now, where so much of the game is boom or bust in a way that might turn some people off, it is something to sit back and marvel that this guy, while doing it older, we know, than most of the other players that have been on their way to some of the historic all-time home run numbers. When you talk about 60 home run seasons, there's been 9 of them in the history of the sport. And if he manages to go back-to-back in seasons hitting 60 home runs, and again, the pace he's on right now, to your point with the last couple of games. He could hit 60 again this year. And if he does, it would be the third person in the history of Major League Baseball with multiple 60 home run seasons.
Wow.
It's him, Mark McGwire, and Sammy Sosa. And we obviously know what's part of the conversation with those other guys. And so as with the Roger Maris record, where we had all these people trying to relitigate who the real home run king is last year, I do think that would be another incredible career footnote for a guy in Aaron Judge who seems to be living up to everything the Yankees could have ever wanted.
Yeah, because McGwire and Sosa, to your point, would have the dreaded asterisk next to their name on the multiple 60 home run seasons. I think what also adds to it, and I'm not saying this because we're big guys, but when big guys do this, as I mentioned, Shohei's big. Well, Aaron Judge is 6'8", 6'7", 6'8". I mean, he's like Paul Bunyan out there and hitting dingers. I mean, what's cooler than that, right? I mean, the dingers is what everybody wants to see in baseball, and to see a massive person hit massive shots is just cool. It's just cool to see, and you have both these guys, which are huge guys, doing incredible things.
Well, I think the name we left out of this, too, in terms of impressive accomplishments, was Elly De La Cruz, the Cincinnati Reds, who you want to talk about another big, impressive athlete who runs like an absolute lunatic. He's at the 20 and 60 mark, 20 home runs and 60 stolen bases, the fifth player since 1900 to do that in the same season. So we do have this proliferation of explosive athletes in the sport right now. But, Dad, you don't got to sell me on large excellence. I'm wearing the thick six shirt today for a reason, man. We came here to celebrate Creed Humphrey's payday. But I will never forget, Dad. Mike Stanton, Giancarlo Stanton, who is the teammate of Aaron Judge in New York, was a teammate of my former college quarterback, Dane Chris, when they were in high school. They both went to Notre Dame High School out here in California. Giancarlo Stanton played tight end back in that day, and we went and saw him play when we were in college. They came and played the Cubs. Dane and Mike are still friends. Giancarlo are still friends, and got us some tickets. We went and saw them play, and we got to meet him in the lobby. And sitting next to this dude, carved out of marble, looks like a Greek god, like all of 6'5", looks like he could walk into an NFL football field and play tight end. And that guy looks like a baby standing next to Aaron Judge. He is dwarfed by this mountain of a man. So yeah, the fact that we do get bigger, faster, stronger, going out here and accomplishing at this level, I do think is noteworthy and is a huge part of the sell for these guys.
And Elly De La Cruz, I mean, he's 6'5". I mean, he's actually a little taller than Shohei, who's listed at 6'4", Judge at 6'7". Now, De La Cruz is thinner. He's like 200 pounds. But the talk this year has been, and it started because of basketball to football, football to basketball, but athletes in one sport playing another sport. You wouldn't have to go much further than Elly De La Cruz as far as being athletic enough to be so good in other sports. The Shohei and Judge may be too big for other sports outside of like football, but De La Cruz, he could fit into a number of other sports with his athletic ability. It is incredible.
Yeah, there's no doubt. So it's been an impressive one. Again, I'd probably side with you if I'm going to pick it. Shohei, the fact that he could just drop pitching this year out of health needs and going and finding these other things probably stands out. The versatility of this player and the high level at which he accomplishes nearly every facet is something to marvel. And the fact that we're going to get that other facet back next season is terrifying to think about.
Yeah, plus I do think he's going to hit the 45-45 club, of which he'll be the – baseball has so many records and so many distinctions. And to be the only one in that club of 45-45 in a year where he's not pitching and just hitting and go back to pitching again next year, he's just so versatile for the player that he is. But to stand alone – again, he has to hit 6 more home runs, 6 more stolen bases, but he has 34 games to do it. I think he's going to do it. So to me, I move past the 40-40 and go to the 45-45, and he would stand alone.
Yeah, in a city that loves its stars, too, out here in Los Angeles, Shohei has got unique juice in terms of the way he moves the local audience here. The Dodgers fan base, obviously incredibly passionate, and they've had a lot to like about his tenure in that Dodger blue so far. Coming up next, let's put this thing to bed, baby. We got football to watch this weekend. But speaking of football, when you say things out loud in front of a microphone, we're going to go back and check in on them. We audit the claims from one of Team USA's flag football captains next on GoJo and Golic. All right, let's take you guys into week 0 with this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into the weekend. Download, subscribe, rate, and review our show. Leave it a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, the Roku channel, Xumo Play, and DraftKingsNetwork.com. If you missed that or our great guest, shout out to Roddy Jones, former Georgia Tech slot back and ACC Network and ESPN college football analyst, for stopping by and looking at the 2024 season with us here. If you missed that, check it out wherever you get our podcast or right here as soon as we get done with the show. And guys, let's start off with this. We detailed the summer of Anthony Edwards the other day, his high-profile rise, the NBA giving the Timberwolves more national TV games this season because of it. Now, apparently, he is also trying to make a bid for Song of the Summer. The Anthony Edwards freestyle dropped. Let's take a listen and see what we think.
Yeah, I'm shooting like Book. Yeah. Damn it, she looked and she took. Ooh. I just might dodge it like Bam. What Dr. Seuss say? He won't hit grins and ham. I just might block like.
All right, you know what, Dad? By no means the worst I've ever heard.
No.
In locker rooms
Nope.
where, listen, I had plenty of guys in my locker room that thought that they could sing, thought that they could rap, anything under the sun, and that by no means, again, touches the bottom of the barrel on what we've produced in these situations before.
No, it does not. I would say there's some potential there. I have always said athletes want to be entertainers. Entertainers want to be athletes. Those are the two jobs that people would love to switch. And I would think because usually the size of entertainers, that athletes would fare better as entertainers and entertainers as athletes. Because there's actually some that have pretty good voices out there. But yeah, that was nothing to go ooh or make a face about. I mean, that was just fine.
Yeah, no. So it's right now, Anthony Edwards, it's one of those things he'd really have to screw up for us to point it out here. And we hope that doesn't happen. It seems like he's on a good trajectory here.
Yeah.
We want this to keep going because you've got this. Him and Anthony Davis are getting set to walk Floyd Mayweather into the ring for a fight that he's doing against an MMA fighter again. So that'll be something interesting, which I guess is cool. That's kind of a thing that people like, is getting to walk someone into the ring. You get all the notoriety. You don't actually have to punch or get punched. That's kind of a dub.
Yeah. Definite size difference in AD and Ant-Man walking Mayweather in to fight John Gotti. As you said, he almost hasn't said anything bad. His take on the 80s skilled best
I'm talking
NBA
like
players.
Actually bad.
We mean like
I'm talking about
that
cancelable, you know.
That all right. That it definitely wasn't cancelable, but it was bad. To be derogatory toward. Thank you. To be derogatory toward a whole era of basketball. After saying I didn't watch it. Obviously, you weren't born in it, so of course you didn't watch it unless you watched highlights of it. That was bad. That wasn't cancel bad. I agree with Jesse, but that was pretty damn bad.
I mean, it's not too far off from J.J. Redick slandering Bob Cousy for playing against plumbers and firefighters, which is not totally untrue back in the day. So I could see where he's coming from.
No, don't try and agitate me on a Friday before football starting. Just don't do it.
Don't do it.
All right, Jesse, we won't do it. Instead, we'll give Dad something new to watch on Netflix. What do we got coming up for that?
Will you be watching? Okay, Netflix trying to capitalize on the Olympics and everything that went down. So season 2 of Sprint starts November 13th. We got a litany of names in the sprinting world that are going to be part of this show. Guess what the first name on the list is? Noah Lyles. So has all of his drama and trash talking just been one big galaxy brain promotion for Sprint?
I mean, I think he naturally is a loud, boisterous guy, but I think it would certainly help this. I'm not going to lie. I did not know there was a season 1
Neither did
of
I.
Sprint, let alone a season 2. But I will say, after having my fill of Noah Lyles, I may tune in to this. So you may get some casual viewers who viewed the Olympics and saw sports they don't normally see and see a boisterous person like Noah Lyles and say, I may check this out. So I think it may actually help.
It might. I got to say, we've talked about it. I found a lot of the Noah Lyles stuff a little bit grating to the point where I'm like, yeah, I don't need to hear any more of that in an extended dance mix. Now, there are some other interesting names that we talked about on this list who we saw just achieve Olympic fame, and I'd like to see this happen. Noah Lyles, when he talked with Shannon Sharp and Chad Ochocinco, said the problem is we don't have a place where people can go and watch us. We don't have a place where we can readily point like a TV deal that a lot of these other leagues have to send people to watch the sport on a regular basis. He recognizes how hamstrung they are, but we have talked about the way that Netflix and storytelling like this, these inside the looks at different sports, can be what we saw for Formula One, what we saw for golf and the PGA. Yep. So I appreciate track and field making the effort. That's all you can do is try and take these stars and capitalize. In the meantime, if it didn't work for me, hopefully and maybe it works for other people that are going to want to check this out. The one thing I do know is we're about to get some takes. Like Noah Lyles is going to give us a couple of clips to circulate from this, and he's going to keep it in the news with his personality, which, to your point, maybe a little bit of it is contrived and with an understanding that, hey, I want to kind of point people back to this. I need to keep sending up the signal flare that we're over here doing our thing, even if also part of it comes naturally.
The fight is now to keep himself, probably himself more than his sport, relevant, right? I mean, whether that's going on podcasts with a very popular podcast with other athletes, being associated with other athletes, though ripping those other athletes, especially the NBA players, probably not the best way to go about it. But that's going to be his job now. He wants the shoe deal. He wants the endorsements. So he has to find a way to stay relevant.
Yep, you've got to capitalize on the attention. It's like being it's like the sitcoms they put on after the Super Bowl. Hey, we're giving you this great window after this thing we know everyone's going to watch. Can you hold the eyeballs that have been set up here for you? That's the job that's laid out in front of track and field right now for Noah Lyles and company in Sprint Season 2, which to your point did not know there was a Season 1, but now we all know better. We're coming off an Olympic year. Maybe we'll do better. Jesse, let's get to the third. Speaking of things around the Olympics, Darrell Doucette made some waves the other day with his comments talking about from the flag football perspective. He is a longtime flag football quarterback for Team USA that's now getting ready to make the Olympic jump in Los Angeles. And after he made those claims that he was better than Patrick Mahomes IQ-wise in the sport of flag football, people went out there and audited it, and the results are kind of mixed.
I mean, he probably shouldn't have gone out and said that if he knew that there was footage. And guess what? There is footage. All right, we have some footage of him, and it's not great, okay? So this clip went out with the person writing, this is the guy who says he's better than Patrick Mahomes. And it's a pretty damning little clip, all right? Not good, guys, not good. And how could you come out and say something like that? Everybody was going to be outraged to begin with, but then also, there's footage out there, okay, like this.
Dad, listen, I look at this and I just see everything else. Like, this reminds me of when we see those bad clips of actors throwing footballs in movies, and you're like, oh God, they probably needed to do something better. Every part of this just looked like someone who is doing this only full time. And I don't want to totally slam. Like, I love and appreciate the flag football's getting a moment. I think it's an awesome part of this. I think that it's great that people are going out and doing this, but that guy throws like someone who's throwing in flag football for a reason. So I look at that and go, all right, like, listen, I appreciate what you're doing, but again, you're probably punching above your weight class right now, and bringing this to the light was always something that was possible.
I guess I'll say it was a rope, it was a touchdown throw, and we all talk about different deliveries of quarterbacks, right? It didn't look like the prettiest thing in the world, but it got
that looked like
results.
A pick six.
Yeah, he got intercepted there.
He got intercepted.
Oh wait, I thought that was a touchdown.
Oh no, that was an interception.
No, he got intercepted, dude.
That was a little loopy pass for an interception.
Wait, was that?
Oh, yeah.
That was a touchdown.
Nope. See the guy.
That was a touchdown.
No.
That wasn't an interception. That was a touchdown. He threw a touchdown.
No.
Again, yeah, that's a touchdown to the front corner.
Oh, wow.
That's a touchdown.
I thought he was throwing it backwards. That's a weird angle on that video. I thought he was throwing that laterally and it got picked off there.
No. Come on, you guys. He rolled right, and he threw a touchdown pass into the front pylon.
Thought that was someone
we'll figure it out. Have a great weekend. See you guys Monday.